Walk me through how Myles Garrett wound up posting a basic farewell letter to the city of Cleveland.
This had been going on, Rich, for 3 or 4 weeks since the Browns season ended. They had been, Myles Garrett and his agent had been trying to quietly make clear to the Browns that he wanted a fresh start elsewhere. Obviously, the Browns are at a different point right now where they still have said publicly that they are not trading Myles Garrett. You know, in the Browns' mind, what they would like to do is redo Myles Garrett's contract, which has 2 years and about $45 million left, make him the highest paid defensive player, one of the highest paid players in football, in the coming months here, and make him a guy who's going to retire as a Brown and go straight into Canton. Well, from Myles Garrett's perspective, this is not about money. There's some of these, standoffs. I think of Brandon Ayuk last summer, where they're going back and forth on the contract. They were not on the same page. And so you had a trade request and he's in the building, he's out of the building, all this stuff. Myles Garrett, this is not a contractual ploy. The Browns stand ready to redo the deal. This is a guy who's 29 years old, just turned 29 in December. He's got a lot of years left. That's a position where you can play well into your mid-30s. But he also knows time is running short to go and try to win a championship. So Myles Garrett truly wants to continue his career someplace else. By making this public now, this has kind of, created some level of pressure on the Browns. The Browns continue to say that their stance has not changed here. This could be a situation, Rich, that we're still talking about, certainly beyond the start of free agency, potentially up to and even beyond the draft here. Those are the natural checkpoints, particularly the draft, because if you're going to do a Myles Garrett trade, which again, the Browns as of now do not want to do, if you're going to do one, you would like to think that happens prior to the draft, because otherwise you're trading picks out into future drafts as opposed to in 2025. Those picks become devalued here. Myles Garrett, if he were traded, would command one of the biggest compensation packages that we've ever seen in an NFL trade. But again, that's not the mentality right now for the Browns. They still want Myles Garrett to be part of the team. They have him under contract for 2 more years. I think it's going to be a while, Rich. These things can happen quickly, but I would say it's probably going to be a while until we know exactly how this resolves itself.
So, a couple of follow-ups then. You mentioned the market would be robust. Name me the teams that you think would jump in on this, Tom.
All 31. I think that basically every team in the league would have to inquire about Myles Garrett, just because you're talking about a 29-year-old all-pro pass rusher, reigning defensive player of the year, who is still very much in his prime. Here you can't. This isn't the NBA. I'm watching all the action over there. You can't trade like your first-round pick 10 years from now. In the NFL, you can only go out 3 years. So is it 3 first-round picks? Is it 2 first-round picks and something else? It would be a significant value because you would have such a competition in terms of driving the compensation. A lot of times too, Rich, when a team says we're not trading the guy, as opposed to the flip side of it, and I'm sure we'll get to Cooper Kupp, where it's very apparent they're going to trade him. That can impact, leverage in terms of the trades here. The Browns are starting from a standpoint of, we are absolutely not going to move this guy. I do believe that there would be a ton of teams. I mean, name a team, that team is probably interested in Myles Garrett. Now, who has the flexibility? How are they constructed? Some of those things would end up being the questions here. But I would fairly say, Rich, almost every team in the league at least would be open to making a move if and when the Browns would be willing to do it.
Well, not every team in the league, not all the other 31 are in line to win a Super Bowl or appear to be in line to win a Super Bowl, and that obviously would have to play into it. And I guess the question would also be if the Browns say, we can go through this year's draft without making this deal, we can wait till training camp, we could do that sort of stuff, would be how they view this year's draft. If it's deep enough for them to say, let's take a ton of capital now, as opposed to potentially put it all together in another draft that has a deeper quarterback pool within it. And that's my next question is, how do you know what's your sense of how the Browns view this draft? Second overall, there are 2 quarterbacks that are considered first round, top of the draft worthy. The Titans are sitting there at 1 right in front of Cleveland. How do the Browns view this draft?
I would say, generally speaking, Rich, there could be a couple quarterbacks that go very high in this draft. But you and I have been talking about this for weeks here, and it was reinforced by conversations I had at the Senior Bowl. I don't know how many teams have grades on Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders that would truly make them top 5 type of talents here. Could they go top 5? Absolutely, because that position tends to be valued at a higher level. in terms of the actual grades, this isn't a quarterback class where you have slam dunk guys that you take up at the top. Now, it's entirely possible because we are very early in the process. Cam Ward did not go to an all-star game. He was invited to the Senior Bowl, decided not to go. Shedeur Sanders went to East-West, didn't really do anything, but at least met with the teams there. Those would be the two guys that potentially you're talking about taken up at the top of the draft. The Browns, like the other teams, are going to have to make evaluations whether or not they think that value is there. I would also say, if you're talking about where the Browns stand right now, trading Myles Garrett, that's the type of deal. I mean, it's the flip side of the Deshaun Watson deal. Look at how the Deshaun Watson trade has impacted the Houston Texans. All the additional picks. So they had the freedom in one draft to take the quarterback in C.J. Stroud and the pass rusher in Will Anderson. The Browns gave up all those first-round picks. What if they can get 2 or 3 first-round picks back and use that to rebuild their roster? I can't say it strongly enough. The Browns are not looking at it from that perspective, but knowing Andrew Berry and how he thinks about these things, you're never going to want actively to take higher picks in future drafts because those are just by nature devalued. The way that most NFL teams look at it as would be a first-round pick in 2026 is really more like a second-round pick this year and vice versa. So you're wanting to get all the draft capital that you can now because then you can also flip those and get additional picks in future years. There's a lot of moving parts to making a trade like this. We've seen wilder stuff than this happen. How does Myles Garrett approach this? How ugly does he want to make it? How much pressure does he want to try to put on the team? How much, are the Browns willing to really dig in their heels on this? That all remains to be seen because even though these discussions have been going on for weeks, it burst into the open yesterday, and that just creates a little different conversation.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.